Lance, my friend, as somebody that has worn a number of hats in your lifetime, I got to start this out with a little bit of a difficult and interesting question. If you knew now what you knew back then along your journey, would you change anything?
I wouldn't change a darn thing. Nope. I believe in providence, and I believe that God has interjected and put his fingerprints all over my life, even when the bad stuff happens. That's actually one of the things I'm most thankful for from God is when he puts challenges and negative things into my life, I know that then there's a gift at the end of that, and that's always a positive thing that comes out as a result of those things.
It's a beautiful answer because I think if I was to ask 10 people, probably nine of them would say, yeah, I regret a lot and I would change a lot of what's happened in my life. But I think it's that perspective that you build through the course of overcoming the adversity that you start to really appreciate the challenges in life and the things that you do wrong that you may classify as a mistake because you're able to learn from them.
hmm Yeah, 100%. The negative is where it all begins. I mean, I started doing guesting on podcasts like this maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I have my own podcast that I've had around since for about 7 years now. But when I started guesting on those shows and folks like yourself, Mike, started asking me those kind of questions, I found myself telling a lot of stories that had come from my life about challenges and then successes that happen after the challenges. And I was on one of these a different show, and a gal finally pointed out to me. She goes, "You know what you're describing, right?" And I said, "What?" "You're describing the law of polarity." And I went, "Oh, well, what is that?" She goes, "Well, the way you described it with negatives and positives, right? You can't have electricity if you don't have a negative and a positive charge. You got to have, there's all these examples, right? Like a yin and the yang. There's night, there's day, there's fire, there's water, there's oil, there's liquid." And when she explained that to me, a lot of things in my life started to make sense because I at least had something tangible I could say that w was occurring. So about a year ago, was having dinner with my children. I have a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old. And they asked me, they go, Dad, you seem like you're not really like ever worried or afraid of anything. Maybe I put that off as like for them, I'm like this fearless dad. And they go, but there's got to be something. Does anything ever make you nervous or you get scared? And I go, oh yeah, for sure. And they go, what? And I go, when everything is going right in my life, I actually get a little nervous. And I go, what? And I go, yeah, because there's this thing called the law of polarity. And I know that something negative maybe is going to happen. I go, do you know when I actually get really excited and like when I'm most optimistic? And they're like, when? When there's bad stuff that's happening to me. Like when I'm having a bad day, as a 41-year-old man who's had enough of those bad days now to know that and lived, that the next day on those after that bad day is usually one of the best days ever. So that's just the mindset I try to have with those sort of things. Because yeah, growth can only happen when you're challenged and there's negative things you need to overcome.
Absolutely. I know that's something that I struggled with for a long time along my journey is looking at those mistakes and really beating myself up over them. And then there came that moment where life really changed and it forced me to change my outlook and learn to accept that, there's good and there's bad. You can't have one without the other. And when you're in those more trying times, when you're facing the storms of life, you're able to build muscles. You're able to
Mm,
really start to work on that self-confidence and also that perspective that allows you to truly enjoy the good times in life. And then when you're standing there and you're in those moments of sunshine, it feels so much more fulfilling.
yeah. How much better does the meat taste after if you've had a really hard hunt and maybe on the last day you finally get that elk, right? Or you only catch one fish and you've been fishing all day, but it's maybe like the biggest one. How much better does that taste? How much better of a story is that, right? In that kind of a way. So yeah, and then there's the opposite where it's like when I bring people out and I guide them fishing, it's I mean I want to put us on fish right away, but then if I put last weekend for instance, I put guys on over about 300 fish. We caught like 112 one day and then about 150 or 60 the day before. It was an insane amount of fish. And I thought, man, now it's like everything's, what if we just have the one or two fish day? What does that mean compared to the if we just kind of spoiled them on those days? So I, that's kind of again like a different perspective that I just try to have on those situations. It's like I really like the struggle. I like doing things the hard way in a certain way. I mean, I try to work harder, work smarter and not harder once I get things established. But I've really just always, even when we started our business, one of our first business, it was like during the Great Recession. And people ask me all the time on shows like this, and they say like, well, what is if there's one piece of advice you could give people as far as business goes, and I go, oh man, start a business in the Great Recession or Great Depression. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, man, you'll never be hungrier, you'll never have more motivation to succeed. You'll be as lean as mean as possible when you start that business, and then when the going's getting good, you're set up to even just crush even more and beat your competitors in that kind of a way.
Absolutely. And, likewise, when I take people out, I enjoy the more difficult moments of the hike and of the adventure. I take a lot of people down to Turkey Run down in Indiana, and there's these huge staircases. You're standing at the bottom of it, and they're like, I can't do that. There's no way. You look up and you see people that are just struggling, standing there against the guardrails. Some of them might even be vomiting at the time, and it looks like a real discouraging moment. So then they're looking back and they're like, I think I'm gonna just turn around. That hike back is another mile and a half back to the truck. It's just as
Mm.
difficult. We get up that staircase and I always take time to snap a picture with them and let them hold on to that kind of like as a grip and grin because you're getting that visual about as well as the physical of what it is that we're trying to do along these journeys of growth. You've got a reference point now. And I think that's so important to be able to find.
Yeah, a reference point. I love that. Yeah. The tricky part about those reference points, I wonder if you agree, Mark, is sometimes I wonder if I like to make the analogy of like our first business again when we started it. It was it was very difficult. We started in the Great Recession, basically a Great Depression. We had almost no contacts. We weren't even licensed architects at that point, so we had to be careful what we could do legally. And the analogy I make all the time is I'm like it was like pushing a boulder up a mountain every single day. We just got up and we just did it. Like we had no choice. If we stopped, the boulder's going to roll back down probably. We'll lose all of our momentum. And then as I kept making that analogy to people in that visual, then I recognized there were certain points where it was like, oh, we got to that stopping point. We kind of got to that plateau, but we know that there's more mountain to climb, whatever. But we at least have a benchmark, right? And the thing I worried about, and I try to really not focus on when I get to those benchmarks or whatever I'm doing, professional, personal, stuff like that, is like try not to look back on the past and get satisfied with that journey, right? It's like, okay, that is a good benchmark. I've hit that point, and then I'm still pivoting my head around and looking like I still got more mountain to climb. How do I climb that next segment of the metaphorical mountain?
To me, got a lot to do with the mindfulness
Mm,
aspect of life, being present in the moment. Because you can look back, you can sit down, look back, and really celebrate those wins, and you can really get yourself caught up in what you've already done and lose sight of the future. Just like you can get caught up in the fear of what's to come and stop moving. But if you stay present and you look at things as the challenges you've already overcome as preparing you for the future, it not only helps you to keep that confidence, but I feel like it really dims the fear
mm.
because it makes you really realize I've got the skills, I've got the tools that I need in order to push through whatever is coming my way.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people get imposter syndrome where they maybe feel like, oh, I've got, holy cow, like I've just been concentrating on pushing that boulder up the mountain. I get to the flat area where I can rest a little bit, and they're like, should I be here? Like, yeah, you should be here. Look, look, you clearly demonstrated you could push the boulder up the mountain. Of course you deserve to be here, right? So then maybe that gives you that once you can pivot your head back towards the next path you got to take, that confidence you're talking about.
Absolutely. And, I think back along the journey with this whole project. A lot of this came about kind of in the moment. I was writing things in my journal and kind of turning them into little snippets to use for the podcast and for blogs and this and that. And at the same time, I was in the middle of working through some stuff in talk therapy. And we discussed the project here and there. And that was a question that was asked to me a lot was, do you feel like you're sitting right there in the lake of imposter syndrome? Because obviously as you're working through things, there's that moment where you feel like you don't have the confidence to survive, right? And then you
Hmm.
look at the actual pillars of the grip and grins of an adventure, and you realize I've built that foundation. I've built that right to stand where I'm at and do these sort of things. And a lot of the time in society today, we get caught up in the results, but we don't take the time to truly celebrate them and soak them in.
Yeah. Yeah, and the journey you got there, right? And then recognizing the positives and the negatives from the journey. What can I, when I go on my next journey, what are some of the things, what are the pitfalls I maybe want to avoid? So that's why I think reflection definitely is important, is like you're trying to strip away those negative things, embrace the positive steps you took to get there and make that happen. Mindfulness, man, that's one that really has hit me hard this summer. Um, Particularly, I got a divorce recently, and then I started dating again. And the gal I'm dating now, we would go on these amazing adventures in Colorado, and we went up to Winnipeg for one weekend and stuff like that. She goes, "Why does it feel like why does it feel like we go on 4 or 5 dates in one day?" She's like, "With you, Lance, the longest our I've never experienced days where they felt just so long, and it wasn't bad. It was just that she was like, my goodness, it just seems like we this day has been like 4 days in one." And we finally got to the conclusion. I go, I think it's because we're so present with each other. We are just very mindful of our time together. We know it's precious. And sure, we are doing sort of like different dates like throughout the day, right? Like we go hiking and we'd find a waterfall and then we come back down, and then maybe we would go to the hot springs in the evening. Then we would go for another walk or a hike, and then we would go to like a supper, and then maybe we'd go to whatever, all these sort of things, fishing at the end. And I think that was my conclusion. It was just like I think we're making a really subconscious effort to be present with each other, and that's where the time, I feel like that's when you can actually make time expand for yourself. Whereas, because you're very acute about what's happening in almost every moment throughout that day. And then there's the days where we get focused on maybe like a task, or something, or we're dealing with like a big project or something like that. And the days can seem really short. And it's sort of this opposite mindset, that I think makes it so you're less present and less mindful.
I can relate to that story 110%. That was actually the catalyst for me going through and making the changes in my life that I did was the divorce. And I took a lot of time to kind of withdraw and really work on myself. And then, inevitably met somebody that's become a part of my life. And we've had a lot of the same experiences where it just feels like, everything's building and building and building. And it just, the good times seem to keep on rolling. And I think a lot of that comes from that shift in perspective. When you take the time to actually allow yourself to digest where you've come from
Hmm.
without adding that negative story to it. And then you start to build that bridge over the river to the next chapter of your life. It does bring that mindfulness with you. And it also builds an appreciation because you start to realize, hey, I kind of put X, Y, and Z together. I made the bad decisions that I made. Let me look for A, B, and C this time. And when A, B, and C connect in the next into the line, it really becomes beneficial because you start to really help each other. And I think that's something that, in today's world where it's so fast paced and
Yeah.
easy to just distract and jump, taking that time to actually slow down and sit with yourself, learn these things, understand who you are, where you've been, and how it shaped you leads to exactly these sort of healthy relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, you just described the challenge. I mean, that's the challenge of the journey is like how do you silo the negative stuff and sort of look past it. What an exercise that I think that it really helped me become more be just able to actually steer away from negative things, thoughts, and not focus on them, and then tackle a lot of just multitasking challenges that I have in everything that I do is I just started meditating probably 6 or 7 years ago. It's since then evolved to as well. I went back to the Catholic Church. Now I pray the rosary every morning, but the same sort of thing applies here. And what I learned from meditation, first of all, I just learned what meditation was. I was using one of these apps, that is on the iTunes store. I can't remember which one it was exactly, but when I'm going into just learning how to meditate, I had thought, oh, meditation means like I'm sitting there and there's nothing in my brain. Like I am somehow just clearing everything out, so I'm just peaceful. And actually what it taught me was no, it's actually about you dealing with these negative thoughts that are coming in and then pushing those ones out and allowing for more space in your mind for the positive things to come through. And so I think for me, it was just a big learning lesson. I was like, oh, okay. So when negative stuff happens, when there's problems in any of my companies, I'm able to not let them steer me towards that negativity. Like I don't get sucked into and just this compounding negative effect that maybe they could have. It's like, oh, I see the problem. I see you problem. Here's how I'm going to deal with you, and here's when I'm going to deal with you, so that I'm still in control of my day. I think that's one of the parts that a lot of us struggle with is like negativity is super sticky, and if somebody comes into the room, they have a negative attitude, you can just kind of feel that energy. It's so hard to get rid of it. The positivity is actually it's a little bit more contagious, but it's not as sticky. It's kind of this sort of opposite effect that they have on each other. And so that's training yourself to not allow the stickiness to happen and cling to you, I think is very important.
I think that word train yourself actually makes it a lot more
Mm,
comfortable for people because we do the physical training, right? If we're going to go on a run or whatever activity it may be, or we train ourselves at work, we train ourselves for this and that. But if you add that to the idea of meditation, I think it takes a lot of the stigma away from it. And one of the ways that I like to introduce people to that is the idea that your thoughts kind of look like the clouds in the sky.
mm.
The jet stream and the wind has the power to push them around. You have the same control. And with the negative thoughts and the racing thoughts, we feel like we lose control, and that's where we get really, really uncomfortable. But this idea that meditation also reminds you that no matter what's going on in your mind, your thoughts, or even around you, there's still the element of control, just like there's the element of decision making. It never leaves you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I wonder where that myth, like I don't know if we just made up these things about things like meditation and what it really means and what it can do for you and stuff like that. I think maybe we just we're as humans, that's probably one of our flaws is we when there's something unknown to us, then we sort of make up a story about it or and we're kind of too afraid to rip off the band-aid sometimes and then dive into that and really seek out what's the meaning behind it and how it actually works and everything like that. So yeah, I hope at least if anybody's listening to this particular segment that maybe it helps them. Because I just try to like talk about my vulnerability on when I do interviews like this and say like, hey, I'm a human too, and trust me, I wasn't born with the ability to under like realize what meditation can do for you, thoughtfulness, mindfulness, being present. We all actually have to train ourselves in order to be able to do that. Yeah, like it doesn't just come. This is all part of the human struggle.
I think a lot of the stories around it and things like that come from our place within the world, though. We are the voice, we are the storytellers. It's easier to write the story of negativity and get caught up in that than it is to build the vocabulary to write the honest or more beneficial story and live through that.
Yeah. 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 More people need to I mean, I'm just fascinated by the humanness of a lot of very well-to-do people. I On our show I've interviewed probably about 400 of them. And again, it's sort of like this if you were only listening to CNN, for example, I think you would get the impression that rich people, wealthy people, successful people are selfish. They are just greedy. They just, they're here to like just control you and stuff like that. And the more people I interview like that, it's dispelled the myth for me. I'm like, these people are some of the most generous, genuine, actually down to earth people. Like at the end of the day, they're just trying to solve a problem. And sure, they're through them solving the problem, whether it's like a product or a service, they should have some reward, right? So the reward is usually money and property and stuff like that. But man, I just and so the older I get, the more I actually get more curious. And I think that's like some people would probably think, nah, that's not the case. Like the older I get, the less curious. I just get even more curious. So I'm just like fascinated by any of these sort of like, oh, I find myself going, ah, I that's probably a false impression of whatever it is. And then I go and, look into it. Like elk hunting. I went elk hunting for the first time in my whole life this last fall and totally changed my whole perspective on the animals, the struggle. It helped me learn more about my brother, who's a professional bow hunter and is vastly, he's the hunter, I'm the fisher. And for me to just understand what he would even say when he would tell me like, yeah, we had a good hunt. I'm like, you didn't kill anything. He's like, oh, you don't get it. And then I didn't kill anything on the elk hunt, and it was 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, I get it. Like I get it now. I mean, it was the journey was just life changing for me, and now I'm completely addicted to, to all of that, and like I can't wait to go next year. Just even if we don't kill anything, I'm like, oh, I get what he means now because I just dove headfirst into that realm, and hopefully it helps me, relate to my brother and be a better brother.
That's where curiosity plays such an impactful role within our journeys. We got to learn how to really truly nurture the ability to step in and actually try things without putting some kind of biased story around it.
Hmm. Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard because we have our lenses, right? I know. How do you do that? And maybe it's just more training, like you said. So, like, is it somebody being super mindful going into that and going, I'm going to try to recognize when I have the biases or the preconceived notions and stuff and push them away and out of my mind and open myself off, probably.
I find when I do the hiking aspect of the project, it's the idea of adventure that pulls people in. And as you work through the journey or through the hike and the experiences all together, they start to shed those layers of stories and things that are holding them back because they're actually experiencing it. And they came out just for the fun and thrill of the adventure. So, again, getting back to the idea of being curious and latching on to just the mindset of things being an adventure and they can be fun and they can be rewarding, I feel is really where all of that begins. And Lance, as we start to run out of time, though, I want to give you time to let people know what you got going on, coming up, how to get in touch with you, work with you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, since this is we talked a lot about the outdoors. I publish all my fishing adventures on Fishing with Lance on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram, and the Fish Angler app. I'm part of the pro staff there, and that's where a lot of my mindfulness happens professionally. And to get paid, actually, f9productions.com is one of my company's websites. I'm an architect and then also a builder. So you can sign up to our newsletter. And then if you want to hear about all of our struggles over the past 7 years, 15 actually, we started the podcast 7 years ago. InsideTheFirmPodcast.com is where you can hear my voice a couple times a week, talking to people like Mike. I'm talking to all kinds of folks on there and just getting their perspective on positivity, professionalism, and personal growth.
That's beautiful. You know, Lance, I definitely enjoy getting the opportunity to pick your brain a little bit, get to know you some. Maybe sometime down the water we can, or down the road we can hit the water together and do some of this mindful adventures together. But until then, I don't believe in goodbye. It's two finals. So whether it's this life or the next, until we meet again, I wish you a safe and prosperous journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.